So now I'm going to transition into some of the existing conditions analysis, and we're going to walk through information like, the transportation considerations, infrastructure, what's the health of the infrastructure and needs, what does it look like from a safety standpoint, what about multimodal connections, gaps, barriers, opportunities. Try to be pretty holistic in our look at conditions within the corridor. So first, I'll start with pavement and just infrastructure in general. It's typically not the most exciting topic, but it's really important. As I started with, there's a lot of investment that has been made in the corridor that exists today. If it were to be reconstructed from, completely from start to finish and kind of rebuild it today, and put back what was there, it'd be about $750 million in 2022 dollars. So a lot of infrastructure that needs to be maintained and thoughtfully taken care of. So starting with pavement, just real quick, I'm just going to hit on some of these highlights. We can certainly come back if there are questions and people want to dig in further to any details on anything I'm sharing. But pavements, for the most part, are in really good shape. There are some isolated areas where there are pavement projects programmed, which is a natural evolution that MnDOT does. And I'll talk about those in a minute. There are 67 bridges, and I won't talk through them all, but you can see the pie chart on the screen that shows, again, most of those are in pretty good condition. There's different rating categories. This does not indicate a major safety risk. It's just, MnDOT kind of tracking how bridges are declining over time. And there are a couple that are going to need some maintenance in the near future, but overall, most of them are pretty good shape. Retaining walls, there's 12 walls. 11 are in the northernmost 2.5 miles. And of course, by far, the oldest wall is the Thompson Hill wall, which is made of stone. So that is a significant one. And again, regarding walls and tunnels, there's about 3,000 feet of tunnels that need to be maintained in this corridor. Again, most in that northern section. So MnDOT does do a 10-year plan to look at, how do we take care of the infrastructure that we have? And the details on here, I won't go through each one by one, but it's just showing that there are both bridge and pavement projects programmed throughout the corridor. Just to orient you, because I'll be showing a few slides that have graphics like this. The top graphic is where we start on the south, and then kind of move through the West Duluth area. And then it just kind of jumps down here. We're still in West Duluth, West Duluth and up into the downtown area. So just imagine those two graphics. If you could smash them together all in one, that's how it looks today. So so the main ones, of course, the TPI interchange, which is going on right now. Thompson Hill does have some programmed improvements. Fifth Avenue Bridge, and of course the Blatnick Bridge. Freight. So not only do we have, of course, vehicles traveling on I-35, we have a lot of freight traffic, and freight is a big deal in this region. Freight dependent businesses comprise 29% of the employment in this area. And when I mean this area, now we're kind of zoomed out a bit to District 1. Which is the green gray color here on your screen, and generating that gross domestic product, so generating the economy for this area, resulting in $6.7 billion of revenue, mostly driven, of course, by mining, manufacturing, and forestry. Interestingly, and I'm going to talk next about some just, how people move through the corridor. Only 5% of trucks travel the entire length of our study area. So they're really sort of coming in. Of course, the port is a main destination, but other freight dependent businesses as well, and kind of moving in and out of our area, not necessarily going all the way through. The ports do generate about 5,000 freight trips each day, and just about half of their truck traffic uses I-35 at some point. So this graphic, I could spend all day on it. There's a lot of data, and I'm not going to. I'm going to hit some of the highlights. But we look at third-party, we get third-party data from cell phones that track how people move and where they're coming from and going to. And it's an interesting way. It's very much aggregated. We can't see individuals or tell who is who, thankfully. But it's interesting data to kind of see where people are coming and going to. And up in the left-hand side of the screen here, it shows average trip lengths. So, as people average over the course of a year, but how they're coming in and out of the area. And you can see the rural areas, much longer trip length, the urban, a little bit more concentrated, and then the downtown even more so, which makes sense when you think about averaging and, just the movements that occur are much more frequent in urban and downtown areas. What's interesting to note, just a couple highlights from this kind of roadmap here, is the green color is indicating the trips originating from the southern project limit and how many are traveling all the way through the length of our study area. So about 10% of trips are going from one side to the next. And again, if you remember what I just said about trucks, it's even less for the freight traffic. 23% of those are exiting at one of the downtown exits when they're traveling north. And then 16% are going into Wisconsin. Now, when you flip that and you have the pink colors, it's kind of looking at the other direction. So from the north to the south. We've got a little bit higher percentage that are traveling all the way through the corridor, about 16%. It's not specifically called out on here, but 46% are exiting at one of the downtown exits. So from the north, it's almost double the percent that are actually coming in and going to the downtown areas. And then about the same percentage that's going into Wisconsin. So lots more we can talk about here. I'm going to just keep us moving and we can certainly come back to that. Traffic variability. Again, a slide with a lot of information on it. Some of the high points here, though, are when we look at the months of a year, and we actually look at the days of a year and even times within a day, we see the greatest fluctuation, in the rural areas and between our highest and lowest months. So, a change of up to even like 10,000 vehicles a day between the highest month in August in the rural areas and the lowest month of January. The urban area is a little bit more stable. The volumes, there isn't as much fluctuation. The interesting thing, though, is that just as a whole, June through October are just all elevated in terms of the annual average. And of course, the winter months are the lower. Fridays are higher, and you can imagine that with the tourism moving in and through. And the weekdays, especially the Monday and Tuesdays, are the lowest. So I guess there isn't really much too earth-shattering there. It's just kind of confirming, what we would anticipate to see for an area with big destinations and seasonal fluctuations due to tourism. And with that, we do also and are considering how events drive traffic patterns through the area. And this just shows that, these are the events that we were paying most attention to, mostly at the locations of Fifth Avenue and Lake Avenue. Those are the main access points for those destinations. And, the conclusion is that, these events do add delay to the transportation system when they're going on. The hockey, UMD hockey, events like that are more of a local attraction when you look at where are people coming from. Of course, Bentleyville and just Canal Park events are more of a regional draw. And we have stats that I don't have on screen here to just support that as well. I have a series of slides here that talk about safety. We're going to start with vehicular safety, and then I'll move into pedestrian and bicycle. But basically, what this is saying is, we all segments of, if when we look at a segment, not just intersection itself, all of our segments of I-35 are showing, they're showing up as red on these graphics, because basically they're kind of above the bar, two different bars that we look at, an average and a critical rate of, we should look a little bit closer here, what's going on. The segments with the highest crash rates are the Fifth Avenue and Lake Avenue area, and then the Thompson Hill through Central Avenue. And I do want to kind of dig in a little bit here. Again, I'm just going to touch the high points, so I don't have to read every detail on here. We're going to post all this information online as well. But when we start on the rural segment, we look back 5 years of crash data, and we see that there's a lot of run off the road type crashes out here. And even in the crash reports, officers are using the phrase lost control. When we look at when a lot of these crashes are happening, they are happening in the winter months of November through February, which, if you remember a couple slides ago, I was talking about how volumes are about 10,000 less in those months than normal. So it isn't necessarily that there's more vehicles out there. It is really related to weather and the horizontal, the curbs, the hills and the curbs. When we kind of zoom in and say, okay, where are some hot spots that we're going to be looking at as we think about improvements? These two really pop out in the rural area for us, the Boundary Avenue Skyline Parkway, and then the US Highway 2 at Skyline Parkway. And really not only for the types of crashes that are happening, but there's definitely some design features that have skews and curves that could be limiting sight distance or causing confusion, that we want to look a little bit closer at. When you see an elevated crash rate and you look at it from a design perspective, and you have some things that are curious, you really want to pay attention to those areas. When we move then into the urban area, so this is again sort of that grand central area, again, we have about 17 of the 23 intersections in here are above where we would expect to see them. And 9 of those 23 are even at above the higher bar of, there might be something going on from a design perspective that we should look at. The intersections are listed here, 40th Avenue with West Michigan, sort of a southbound ramp. These are all really related to ramps, 27th and Helm, and Central Avenue ramp. What types of crashes are happening in this area? Again, it's a combination of rear ends, run off the roads, side swipes in those winter months. The crash reports give us all the details about, was it snowing, ice, rain, and 50% of those were occurring in those conditions. So this area is interesting because we do have a lot of very closely spaced interchange ramps, which are what those kind of blue squiggly lines are showing on that graphic. And some, so close spacing, there's a lot of merging and diverging, and there's some older design features here, like left exits and entrances that people don't expect most days, and honestly, some of those aren't even built anymore. So definitely some combination of factors that we'll be looking at through this area. Again, just right now talking about from a vehicular safety standpoint, we'll come back to the pedestrian bicycle. Zooming in, I talked about this already, I kind of hit the high points, but Central and Grand and the ramp locations, just the skewed intersections, closely spaced, lots of things going on in here. And I talked about it before, but a lot of the multimodal crossings, so pedestrian and bicycles, are just sort of uncomfortable and unprotected from the vehicular traffic. In the downtown segment, we have a lot of run off the road, rear end, and side swipe. So similar crash types, again, most occurring in the winter months, most occurring interestingly in the afternoon period. So we kind of look at all of those configurations and also think about events and, you know, what might be influencing those crash rates. Some of the hotspots we are looking at, of course, Fifth Avenue. And we know there has been a study done of that as well. And so in close coordination with that, but at that location, there was a lot of failure to comply with the signals. In the Lake Avenue ramp area, mostly rear ends. And again, a lot of closely spaced intersections and movements. And the 21st Avenue ramps, there are a lot of rear end crashes, and that does kind of align. For the most part, the I-35 corridor operates pretty well for vehicular traffic in terms of minor congestion or delays. It's really where some of those side streets interact with it that we do see a little bit of delay and queuing. But overall, the corridor itself is pretty efficient. I didn't want to skip over, but we do always look at serious crashes. We look at any fatals or severe injury. Of course, we never want any of that to happen. It has happened within the last 10 years. There's been 4 fatals and 18 serious injury crashes. 3 of those fatals were wrong way drivers on I-35. During the nighttime, we kind of have most occurring in the summer and fall months, June through September, which is sort of opposite of our winter crash trend. 50% did involve a DUI, and the majority occur in the downtown sub-area. I know that was a lot of data. That was the traffic and safety. And now I want to touch on multimodal opportunities. So I've talked about how we're trying to look holistically at this, not only how vehicular and freight traffic move along I-35, but how people move across and within. And there's a lot out there today in terms of connections to the Lake Walk. We have a variety of types of way people are moving across at grade, like the Lake Avenue that's shown, and grade separated, you know, above bridge or under infrastructure connections. There are 23 grade separated crossing locations along our entire corridor. Lake Avenue and Fifth Avenue are the highest volume crossing locations. And what we are kind of looking at here is, where do we have demand to cross? You know, where do we have areas that are shown in the darker pink colors, where we have high proportions of trips that are less than 2 miles in length? And, you know, that starts to make us question, is there potentially more demand for pedestrian and bicycle crossings than actually being used today? And people are choosing to make a short trip in a vehicle because there isn't a safe or comfortable crossing. So you can see those areas that kind of pop out on this screen here. As I mentioned, the highest volume demand crossing areas are Lake Avenue and Fifth. In June, in a typical day, we counted 448 people at Lake Avenue and just over 220 at Fifth Avenue that are wanting to cross at that location. In comparison, the Skyway to the deck carries about 240 people on a typical day. What's interesting, though, is we also have 10 locations where we do have grade separated crossings, and they carry very few pedestrians. One example is the Wade Stadium. It was one of the images I had before. Actually, very, very few using that. And it's been around for a while, so it kind of indicates that, you know, maybe land uses have changed and aren't supporting that as a necessary connection or destination. So not only do we think about where do people want to be, we've also taken a look at crash data any pedestrian and bicycle crash data. And it might be a little bit hard to see, but the reds unfortunately indicate where we've had some fatal crashes. The oranges are serious injury. And then where we've had bicycle or pedestrian crashes are in the green and the bike symbol. And you can see that concentration definitely is mostly in our urban and downtown areas. So that kind of wraps up existing conditions. I just have a couple slides left, and then I can't wait to see your faces and talk to you all. But we also are taking a look at where are we going for the future. So we think about things like, how is the region growing? How is what are some plans for targeted local growth? And what does that mean from a regional and freight growth and demand for people using and getting across the highway? So we haven't done our future forecasting yet. That's sort of our next step in terms of what does it need to be. But what we are looking at is things like the planning studies that have already been done. So the Duluth Superior MIC did a long range transportation plan, and it talked about household growth and employment growth. And there is some growth that's planned for this area. You know, in general, looking at history, the city's population sort of peaked in the 1960 at about 107,000 people. And of course, there was the industrial decline of the 1970 through 1990s. But since 1990, the population's been pretty stable. So we don't want to overinflate the growth potential. We want to be realistic, as realistic as we can be with, you know, kind of projecting out into the future. But we use things like this graphic that's showing where some of those household and population growth could occur, and that is based on, you know, some of those catalyst areas we were talking about before as well. Where is their land for redevelopment potential, infill development potential, or even just new growth in land use and business.